Welcome back to The Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we are doing something a little different. We're time traveling, well, sort of.
Sort of.
We're anchoring ourselves firmly in the present moment. It's Thursday, January 29th, 2026. We are here in New York City, and if you've been following the headlines or even just walking the streets, you know the vibe in this town is, well, it's complicated.
Complicated is, putting it mildly, I'd say it's a pivotal moment. I would argue it's the most confusing, maybe contradictory, and definitely fascinating moment in New York municipal history since, I don't know, the 1970s.
That is a big claim, but I think it holds up. We've just watched a new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, take the oath of office.
Right.
And this isn't just a standard changing of the guard, where one moderate Democrat hands the keys to another. This feels different. It feels like a tectonic shift.
It is. I mean, you're talking about a move from the era of Eric Adams, a former police captain, the law and order guy, the swagger guy, to a democratic socialist whose entire platform is built on things like rent freezes, free buses, and a completely different language around public safety.
It's a massive ideological pendulum swing. You've gone from a mayor who famously carried a gun to a mayor who, probably carries a copy of The Indispensable Zinn.
Exactly. And what makes this so fascinating to analyze right now is the context. Because we are looking at this paradox that, according to traditional political science, just shouldn't exist.
Okay, let's unpack that, because this is the hook that really grabbed me when we were digging through the research stack. We just wrapped up 2025.
Right.
And by almost every single metric, and we're going to get into the absolute nitty-gritty of the data in a minute, 2025 was statistically one of the safest years in New York City history. Gun violence.
Lowest ever recorded.
Murders. Down significantly.
Right. So if you just look at the raw numbers, the Adams administration did exactly what they promised back in 2021. They drove crime down. They delivered the product.
And yet, the city voted for a radical overhaul of public safety. They looked at those record-breaking safety numbers and said, no thanks, we want to try something completely different.
Yeah.
So the mission we have today is to figure out why. Why fix what the numbers say isn't broken?
To answer that, you can't just look at the citywide averages. It's not enough. We have to look at the map. We have to look at the budget lines. And we have to acknowledge there isn't really one New York City. There are two.
The two cities phenomenon. We hear that phrase a lot, usually in campaign commercials.
Sure, it's a cliche, but it's also an operational reality. I mean, the experience of safety, the experience of policing, the distribution of city funds, it's radically different depending on whether you're standing on a corner in the South Bronx or, a corner on the Upper East Side.
And that disparity, that geographic and economic gap is what you're saying decided this election.
It's exactly what decided this election.
So here's our roadmap for this deep dive. We're going to analyze the public safety playbook of the last 12 years. We aren't just looking at today. We're looking at the arc.
Right.
We've got the foundation laid by Bill de Blasio, the precision and omnipresence model of the Eric Adams years, and now the incoming Mamdani community safety model.
And we aren't just going to be reciting crime stats. We're going to follow the money. We're going to look at how the budget, how police presence, how crime are all unequally distributed across the boroughs. We want to understand how race, wealth, and geography didn't just influence the 2025 election. They effectively determined the future of the NYPD and the city itself.
It's a tale of 3 mayors, 2 cities, and one very, very uncertain future. So let's dive in. Let's start with the immediate past, the Adams legacy. We're calling this part Getting Stuff Done, because that was the slogan on the hats, right?
It was. Get stuff done. And if you strip away the personality, the nightlife, all the controversies, and you just look at the 2025 scorecard, they got stuff done.
Let's hit the headline stat first, because it is staggering. In 2025, New York City saw 688 shooting incidents.
Which is an incredible number. I want to pause on that because it's so easy to get numb to these stats.
Right, it's just a number.
It is. But for context, that is the lowest number of shooting incidents in the city's recorded history. It didn't just beat the previous record from 2018, it shattered it. We're talking about nearly 70 fewer shootings than that previous benchmark. And what that translates to is hundreds of people walking around today who statistically wouldn't have been if we were still at 2021 numbers.
That is massive. And it wasn't just shootings. Major crime citywide dropped 3%. Homicide.
Plummeted by 20.2%.
Yeah.
And transit crime, which was such a huge talking point just a few years ago, everyone was terrified of the subways. That was down significantly.
And there were specific success stories, right? The quality of life metrics that people might have noticed in their daily lives. Like, remember the lithium-ion battery crisis, the fires from the e-bike batteries?
Oh, absolutely. It felt like every week there was another tragic fire on the news. You'd see the footage of flames just blowing out of an apartment window.
It was terrifying.
Well, the administration's action plan cut the deaths from those fires by 67% in 2025. And that took a mix of regulation, enforcement against shops selling bad batteries, and, public education.
And then there was Operation Padlock to protect
The cannabis shops.
Oh, man, the cannabis shops.
Yeah.
I feel like for a while there, you couldn't walk a block in Manhattan without seeing 3 unlicensed weed shops with neon signs selling who knows what.
The Wild West.
Yeah.
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
And the city finally got the legal teeth from the state to act on that.
Yep.
They shut down over 1,600 illegal shops. They seized about $116 million in illegal product.
So when Adam says he delivered on safety and order, the ledger, it really backs him up. He cleaned up the corners.
He did.
So here's where it gets really interesting and where we need to dig deeper. How do they do this? Was it just luck? Did the economy get better? Or was it a specific tactical choice?
Oh, it was absolutely a tactical choice. It was a strategy called precision policing coupled with omnipresence. And we need to really visualize what omnipresence meant, because it wasn't just some buzzword. It was a physical change in the environment.
Omnipresence, that sounds a little, it sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, doesn't it?
It's meant to sound overwhelming. The idea was to flood the zone. Adams and his police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, deployed thousands of officers on foot patrols. They brought back a version of the old anti-crime units, rebranding them as neighborhood safety teams.
But let's look at the subway, because I think that's where most New Yorkers really felt it.
For sure.
Let's actually visualize omnipresence for a second, because flooding the zone is a metaphor, but the reality was physical. If you walked into the Times Square station or Union Square in, say, July of 2025, what did you see?
You saw a fortress. You didn't just see 2 officers chatting near the turnstile, staring at their phones. You saw layers. This was the Cops Cameras Care initiative.
Okay, layers. Break that down.
Layer 1. The conductor announcements were different, more frequent, constantly reminding you of police presence. Layer 2. You step onto the car, and you aren't alone. There are 2 cameras in every single car, and they're clearly visible. Layer 3. The platform patrols. They mandated that officers couldn't just stand there. They had to physically move between the cars at every single stop.
So constant motion.
Constant motion. They surged over 1,000 additional officers into the transit system every single day.
It changed the physics of the commute. It removed the empty spaces where disorder usually happens.
That's it, exactly. And it wasn't just bodies, it was technology. The drone program in 2025 wasn't just for emergencies. They were using them for rooftop checks during parades, for monitoring large crowds at the beach. It was the normalization of surveillance.
Right.
And the data shows that while people said they didn't like being watched, their behavior changed because they were watched. It's the panopticon effect in real time.
But did they just spread this out evenly across the city? Did a quiet neighborhood in Staten Island get the same omnipresence as like a busy hub in Brooklyn?
No, and that's the precision part. This is where we get into that uneven distribution of resources. They focused on what they call violence reduction zones. They looked at the data and said, okay, where is the violence actually happening?
So they were targeting.
Hyper-targeting. For example, look at the 25th Precinct, which covers the 125th Street corridor in Harlem. Or look at Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, which had become notorious for open-air markets and vice.
Right, the so-called Market of Sweethearts area.
Exactly. The NYPD saturated those zones. The 25th Precinct saw a 21% drop in major crime. Roosevelt Avenue saw a 24% drop. They targeted the hot spots, and they suppressed the violence through sheer weight of force and technology.
Okay, so the strategy worked. The numbers went down. The streets were statistically safer. But, and there's always a but in New York politics, if everything was going so great, why did the voters show Eric Adams the door? Why are we sitting here talking about Mayor Mamdani?
Because safety is 2 things. It's the reality, the statistics, and it's the feeling, the vibe. And despite the drop in shootings, the vibe of disorder persisted for a lot of New Yorkers.
What was driving that disconnect?
A few things. First, while violence was down, property crime and retail theft were really stubborn issues. I mean, we've all seen the videos or seen it in person of people just sweeping shelves into garbage bags at Duane Reade.
The toothpaste is locked behind plexiglass.
Exactly. Even though retail theft dropped about 14% late in the term, the visibility of it, that feeling of lawlessness, that creates a sense of disorder that a low murder rate doesn't necessarily fix.
It affects your daily quality of life. You feel like the social contract is fraying when you have to press a button to ask someone to unlock your deodorant.
Precisely. And then there was the controversy over involuntary removal.
Right. This was the directive to involuntarily transport people with severe mental illness from the subways to hospitals.
It was a major policy pillar. They connected over 8,900 people to hospitals or shelters, which sounds good on paper. But for many voters, particularly on the progressive side, seeing police officers physically removing distressed people, it didn't look like safety. It looked like a failure of social services.
It highlighted the visible poverty and the mental health crises that police presence alone just couldn't solve.
You can arrest the guy jumping the turnstile, but if there's a homeless encampment on the next block, the voter still feels like the city is out of control.
So you end up in a situation where the law and order voters were annoyed by the retail theft, and the progressive voters were alienated by the aggressive policing tactics.
It was a pincer movement, and that paved the way for the conversation we're having now about Zohran Mamdani. But before we get to the new mayor, we have to look further back.
Right.
To understand Adders's correction, we have to look at what he was correcting. We need to talk about the Bill de Blasio era.
The de Blasio years, 2014 to 2021. Wow, it feels like a lifetime ago. But you're right, the policies set in motion then are still shaping the landscape today.
They are the absolute foundation, and the biggest headline from that era, the thing that really changed the game, was the end of stop and frisk.
Oh, absolutely. I think people forget the sheer scale of it. In 2011, under the Bloomberg administration, there was something like 685,000 stops in a single year.
Nearly 700,000.
Yeah.
It was industrial-scale policing. And we have to be clear about the demographics. The vast, vast majority of those stopped were Black and Latino men, and the vast majority were innocent of any crime.
And by the end of de Blasio's term, those stops had declined by over 95%.
Over 95%. It was a near total dismantling of the policy.
And here is the aha moment, right? Because the prediction from the critics and from a lot of people within the police department at the time was that if you ended stop and frisk, chaos would reign, the city would burn.
That was the argument. We need this tool to keep the city safe. But the data proved otherwise. Stops plummeted and crime continued to drop. That was a massive realization for criminology and for the city. It basically disproved the theory that you needed aggressive, suspicionless stops to maintain order.
So de Blasio proved you could have safety without these unconstitutional stops. What else defined that era that we need to understand for today?
The decriminalization of poverty. That was the philosophy. They shifted from criminal summonses to civil tickets for quality of life offenses. They reduced marijuana arrests by 98% between 2014 and 2020.
Which, set the stage for the legalization we have now.
Correct. And crucially, they made the commitment to close Rikers Island.
Rikers, man, that name just looms so large over the city.
It does. And the plan was to close Rikers by 2026, which is, well, now, and replace it with smaller borough-based jails.
Oh.
That timeline is now a major, major conflict point for Mayor Mamdani, but the commitment itself started with de Blasio.
And he also introduced the neighborhood policing model, right? The NCOs?
Yes, neighborhood coordination officers. The idea was to give cops off radio time. So instead of just chasing 911 calls all day, they were supposed to walk the beat, talk to shop owners, actually build trust. The goal was to humanize the badge.
So we had de Blasio trying to soften the footprint. Then we had Adams coming in to sharpen the footprint with precision policing. And now we have Zohran Mamdani.
The Mamdani experiment.
Let's talk about this. January 1st, 2026. Zohran Mamdani is inaugurated. He's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America.
It's a historic shift. It really is.
So how does a socialist win New York City immediately after a record-low crime year under a former cop? I mean, it just seems so counterintuitive.
It goes back to that split electorate we were talking about. Mamdani didn't win by promising to be tougher on crime. He won by completely reframing the definition of safety.
How so?
He campaigned on reconciling safety with justice. He talked about affordability rent freezes, free buses as public safety issues.
So his argument is that a person who isn't worried about eviction is a safer citizen.
Essentially, yes. He's arguing that the root cause of crime is economic instability. But he also has a very specific structural plan. He isn't just talking philosophy. He's trying to build a new bureaucracy. We need to talk about the Department of Community Safety, or DCS.
This is the big proposal. Tell us about the DCS.
So the proposal is to create a brand new city agency. The budget is proposed at $1.1 billion. Now, to give you a sense of scale, that's roughly 10% of the NYPD's entire budget.
That is a significant chunk of change.
It is. The mission is to consolidate all the different violence prevention offices, like the Office of Neighborhood Safety, the crisis management systems, and put them under one roof. The goal is to treat violence explicitly as a public health issue, not just a criminal justice issue.
But let's follow the money here, because $1.1 billion for a new department doesn't just appear out of thin air. Is this new money?
No, and that's the rub. It's a transfer. Mamdani is pulling the budget from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, the Office of Neighborhood Safety, and crucially, he's trying to siphon off the school safety agents' budget from the NYPD.
Oh, wow. The school safety agents. That's been under NYPD control since the Giuliani days. The police unions consider that their turf.
It's absolutely their turf. So when we say budget transfer, what we really mean is a turf war. He is trying to take 5,000 uniformed agents out of the police hierarchy and put them under a civilian health agency. That isn't just accounting, that is a fundamental redefining of what a school guard is.
So what does DCS look like on the ground? If I'm walking through a neighborhood, how is it different from the NYPD?
Well, instead of Adams school safety zones, which were heavy on police presence around schools, Mamdani is rolling out youth justice hubs and YFAC centers.
Youth justice hubs, okay.
These are designed to operate during what they call the danger window.
The danger window.
The hours between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. That is statistically when youth violence peaks, right after school lets out, before parents get home. The idea is to have centers open during those hours, providing mentorship, food, safe spaces, art therapy, basically replacing the beat cop on the corner with a youth mentor in a community center.
It's a prevention-first model. But here's the curveball that really surprised me, and I think a lot of people. Mamdani, the socialist, the reformer, he kept Jessica Tisch as police commissioner.
It was the shock of the transition. Jessica Tisch was Adams's appointee. She's the one who implemented the omnipresent strategy.
I have to stop you there, though, because that sounds like good political strategy on paper, but does it actually make sense? You have a socialist mayor who ran on, dismantling the police state, and his first move is to rehire the architect of the omnipresent strategy. That doesn't feel like a hybrid approach to me. It feels like a betrayal of his base.
It feels that way if you look at the rhetoric, sure. But look at the leverage. Mamdani knows he can't fire the rank and file. If he fired Tisch on day one, the unions would have gone to war. By keeping her, he buys himself a shield.
A shield.
He signals two things. One, he respects confidence. She delivered the stats. You can't argue with that. Two, he isn't trying to defund or abolish the police overnight.
But isn't he just setting up a civil war inside his own administration? You have the new Department of Community Safety fighting the NYPD for budget and for turf. If Tisch is as competent as you say, she isn't going to let that money go without a fight.
And that is exactly the friction we are seeing unfold right now.
Yeah.
It's a gamble. He's essentially saying, we will keep the high-tech, competent policing under Tisch. YD, we are going to build this massive social investment structure alongside it with the DCS. It's an attempt to bridge the two cities.
Speaking of the two cities, let's get to the heart of this deep dive. We need to talk about geography, because when we say crime is down, that creates an image of a city that is uniformly safe. But that is not what the map shows at all.
Not at all. The map of crime in New York City is incredibly lumpy. It's concentrated.
Let's look at the Bronx versus the rest of the city.
The disparity is just stark. If you look at the top 10 neighborhoods for violent crime in 2024 and 2025, 6 of them are in the Bronx.
6 out of 10.
And the risk factor is terrifying. The statistical risk of being a murder victim in the Bronx is 4 times higher than it is in Queens.
4 times?
Think about that. You cross a bridge, and your risk of lethal violence drops by 75%.
That's unacceptable. I mean, we're supposed to be one city, right?
Theoretically. But then look at Manhattan. Manhattan has a completely different profile. It has the highest property crime rates. Grand larceny in Manhattan is 3 times higher than in Brooklyn.
Because that's where the stuff is.
Exactly. Manhattan is the retail hub, the tourist hub, the wealth hub. It's a target for theft. The Bronx is suffering from concentrated poverty, which correlates with interpersonal violent crime.
You mentioned a study earlier, the machine learning insight. This really blew my mind. I want to drill down on this because this is the kind of weird data I love. You said they scraped housing ads.
Yes. This was a study published recently that focused on Brooklyn, but the findings apply citywide. Researchers use machine learning to analyze fine-grained neighborhood socioeconomic status, or NSES. But here's the cool part. To get the data, they didn't just look at the census. They scraped data from thousands and thousands of housing advertisements.
Housing ads, like apartment for rent, exposed brick.
Exactly that. They used the language and the pricing in those housing ads to map poverty and wealth at a micro level, block by block. They were looking for what they called semantic markers of status.
What kind of markers?
Words like exposed brick, original details, or chef's kitchen. These didn't just signal wealth. They signaled a landlord who was invested in the property's maintenance and its image.
Okay, and on the flip side, what were the markers of disadvantage?
Keywords like Section 8 accepted, close to transport, or specific mentions of security cameras in the ad itself. Ironically, advertising high security in a listing correlated with higher actual crime rates in that block. The algorithm built a fine-grained SES score for every single city block based purely on these text descriptions.
So you're telling me if you know the rent price and the keywords in a housing ad on a specific block, you can predict the crime rate on that block?
With depressing accuracy. That score predicted shootings with higher accuracy than the NYPD's own historical crime data did. Disadvantaged neighborhoods had significantly higher rates of harassment, burglary, and assault. The takeaway is that policing manages the symptoms, but the map of crime is essentially a map of economic disadvantage.
Which brings us right back to Mamdani's argument. If the map of crime is a map of poverty, you can't arrest your way out of it. You have to change the map.
That is the thesis. But changing the map costs money, and it changes how people vote.
Let's follow the money then. We're in part 5. The money, the votes, and the demographics.
So you've got this tension in the budget. Under the Adams and Hochul era, we saw heavy investment in the uniform. Governor Hochul's budget included $3 billion in state investments for public safety tech, officers, subway patrols.
$3 billion. That is a lot of cameras and overtime.
It is. Hochul's FY 2026 budget specifically earmarked $370 million for gun violence and another $77 million just for subway safety platform patrols conductors. That is state money pouring into the enforcement bucket.
And Mamdani is trying to shift those funds to upstream prevention.
Right. But here's where the politics gets so tricky. The voting patterns in 2025 showed that the city is functioning as two distinct worlds. We can call them World A and World B.
Break them down for us.
World A, high-income, often majority white districts. Think Upper West Side, parts of Brooklyn Heights. These areas experience lower violent crime, but very high property crime.
These are the people worried about the toothpaste being locked up.
Right. And interestingly, these voters tended to vote for moderate or independent candidates. Initially, Adams' base. They want order. They want clean streets. They want to see the cop on the corner because it makes them feel their property is safe.
And World B.
World B consists of the disadvantaged, often majority Black or Hispanic districts. The South Bronx, Brownsville, East Harlem. These are the neighborhoods that experience the highest rates of gun violence. In fact, about 50% of the city's shootings happen in just a handful of these neighborhoods.
And logically, you'd think these neighborhoods would want the most police, right?
Yeah.
Because they are the ones who are actually in danger.
That's the conventional wisdom. But here's the paradox. These areas were the primary base of support for Mamdani's progressive platform.
Wait, really? The people experiencing the most violence voted for the guy who wants to replace police with community centers. That contradicts everything we usually hear on the news.
It does, but it makes perfect sense if you look closer. The analysis suggests it's because they are dissatisfied with the slow pace of structural reform. They've seen omnipresence. They've seen the cops on the corner for decades. They've lived through stop and frisk.
And nothing has changed for them.
Exactly. And yet, they are still living in the neighborhoods with 4 times the murder rate. They want radical intervention in housing and labor markets. They don't just want a cop on the corner. They want the corner to not be a place where poverty is concentrated in the first place.
That is a powerful message. It says, we've tried your way, we're still dying, let's try the other way.
That's it. And the demographics are shifting too.
Yeah.
We talk about people leaving New York, post-pandemic, the wealthy left, but they came back.
The rents in Manhattan certainly suggest they came back.
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
But the real drain, the permanent drain, is lower income Black and Hispanic households. They are leaving the city entirely because of the cost of living.
So the city is becoming wealthier and whiter in some areas, and the working class is being pushed out.
Which reshapes the electorate. If the working class leaves, the political base for a socialist mayor might actually shrink over time. It's a race against the demographic clock for him.
So Mamdani has to deliver, and he has to deliver fast. Which leads us to the challenges of 2026. Because it is not going to be smooth sailing for him.
Not at all. He is facing what looks like a three-front war.
Front number one, the federal government.
We have President Donald Trump back in the White House. And he has explicitly threatened to deploy the National Guard to New York City.
Can you imagine National Guard troops patrolling Times Square?
It would be a constitutional crisis and a PR nightmare. But beyond the troops, the federal government controls the purse strings. Mamdani's DCS model relies heavily on grants, community violence intervention grants. A hostile White House could cut that funding tomorrow.
So you have a socialist mayor versus a right-wing president fighting over the control of NYC streets. That's volatile.
Very. Front number two, the police force itself. Burnout.
We mentioned the overtime earlier.
Omnipresence is exhausting. You can't surge 1,000 officers into the subway on overtime forever. Reports suggest that despite low attrition in 2025, the rank and file are tired. And now Mamdani wants to disband the Strategic Response Group, the SRG.
The SRG, that's the unit often seen at protests and riot gear, right?
Yes. They are the muscle of the department. Mamdani wants them gone. That is going to cause massive friction with the police unions and the rank and file officers who see the SRG as their essential backup.
And front number three, the Rikers clock.
The borough-based jails must be ready by 2026, this year, to close Rikers. It's a logistical nightmare inherited by Mamdani. If he can't close Rikers, he breaks a core promise to his base. If he closes it without the new jails being ready, he risks a massive safety crisis. It's a lose-lose situation unless he can somehow thread the needle perfectly.
Talk about pressure. It feels like he is trying to perform open-heart surgery while running a marathon.
It's the toughest job in politics right now, I think.
So let's wrap this up. We are witnessing a massive pendulum swing. We went from de Blasio's philosophy to Adams' enforcement, and now to Mamdani's prevention-first model.
The stats prove that Adams' methods worked to lower the numbers. 2025 was safer on paper, but the election proves that New Yorkers wanted something different. They wanted a solution to the cost of living and the root of crime, not just the suppression of it.
It's a fascinating experiment, and here's the question I want to leave our listeners with today. We talked about the Bronx having 4 times the murder rate of Queens, and we established that this is driven by socioeconomic status.
Right.
Can a Department of Community Safety actually fix that? Or is Mamdani trying to solve a macroeconomic problem, global capitalism, national inequality with a municipal agency?
That is the billion-dollar question. Can you fix a global problem with a local budget?
And here's the provocative thought to mull over. Let's look forward to 2027. Let's say crime goes up slightly, just a tick, but rent goes down, evictions go down, social services improve. Will New Yorkers consider that a success? Or will the ancient primal fear of crime override everything else?
History suggests fear is a powerful motivator, but New York loves to defy history.
We shall see. We will be watching the numbers, the maps, and the money. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Stay curious and keep diving deep.